Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads it must converse. Sundays with Borges.
Yes.
Hey,
Hi,
hey, Yasmin.
everyone. I'm Yasmin from To the Lit House.
That's right. Links in the description box. Today we're going to answer the question definitively. Is this Borges' best story?
Are we? I didn't know we were
I don't
answering
know.
that question.
But it quite possibly could be. This
Mhm.
story is amazing. It is the title story for the third collection that Borges did called The Aleph
Yeah.
and Other Stories. And it is an amazing one, almost like a quintessential Borges
Yeah, it's
story.
a story that a lot of people think about when they think about Borges. It's the first story that I read where I was like, wow, he's a genius. Um, and it's a story about everything.
That's right. It's about everything. It seems like it's about a very, very pointed relationship kind of stuff, but then it just expands to unbelievable territory. Let's get
Hmm.
to it.
Yes, let's go.
There's a tendency to just talk about
This
Borges.
story, yeah, and then not talk about it. Yeah,
So the quotes at the start of this thing are really cool to
yeah.
set you up for what is coming. But um what happens right at the beginning is a friend, um unrequited love is what it is. Borges is our main character, the
Hmm.
I in the story, and Beatrice Viterbo. But Beatrice, oh, what a wonderful name for your
Hmm.
unrequited love, Dante,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
And no doubt Borges did that intentionally. She dies. Um, she dies, and the same day, Borges notices a new advertisement that's up. Kind of one of those big boards that's on the highway or
Yeah.
something like this. And it strikes him that the world is already different than it was when she was alive.
When she was alive, like change, creating this distance between this person
Even
and him.
even that same day, the world is
Hmm.
already different.
Yeah.
And it says the world moves on in an infinite series away from her.
Hmm.
And as we know with Borges, no word is without weight and meaning. So
Yes.
the infinite series being brought out right at the beginning has some meaning to it. But he
Hmm.
says the universe may change, but I won't.
I
Just like a
won't.
kid over there.
Yeah.
But I won't change. I'm gonna remember her forever. I'm gonna,
Yes.
I'm gonna stay remembering her and honoring her memory.
Right. And
He
she'll
he's in love with her.
still be alive in my mind too.
Right. Very cool. And he reflects that April 30th is her birthday, and he goes to her house. April 30th. Every April 30th, he goes to her family's house,
Hmm.
and he this is the first part where we were talking a little bit beforehand. And I said Borges is not necessarily a likable character in this book because
Hmm.
he is insinuating himself into this family more and more.
Yeah.
Whether it be one time a year, sure, but it says explicitly that he goes later and later each time, and he stays for longer and longer before he
Hmm.
excuses himself. And
Yeah.
then there's a rainstorm. There's a rainstorm one year, and I think it's 1933. That's
30.
right.
Yeah.
So 4 years into it, a downpour comes to his aid, and they're forced to ask him to stay for dinner. And
Hmm.
so he does, and he says, I won't let that uh, fine precedent go to waste. So the next year he turns up a few minutes after 8 with a confection from Santa Fe. So he's
Hmm.
bringing something to add to the dinner, and to
Hmm.
just insinuate himself in more.
Hmm.
It is a lovely, on one hand, a lovely kind of uh, remembrance,
Gesture. Oh,
but
or
them
that.
getting together to remember Beatrice, and
Yes, it is.
but then on the other hand, it's like, well, what is he?
What is he
Why does he
doing?
do
And
this?
it doesn't seem like he's entirely sure of what he's doing. it
Right.
seems when he's, telling the reader about it, it seems kind of like he went by accident on her birthday, or almost by chance, and then just kept staying longer and longer with no clear purpose in mind. And, when you lose someone and then you see somebody that reminds you of them, that's painful. So I imagine that him seeing the father and the cousin was to some degree painful, and same for the father and the cousin to see Borges. But this kept happening and it became this tradition. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, no one's really sure why this is happening.
Right. And they develop a relationship.
Hmm.
Especially Borges and Carlos Argentino. Carlos
Hmm.
Argentino
What a name.
is a great name, isn't it? 1941. So this has been going now over a decade. In 1941, he shows up with um, a libation. He shows up with some alcohol,
Hmm.
maybe brandy. It says right. So a real light after dinner drink, and they have some drinks.
Hmm.
And Carlos Argentino starts speaking very pompously, and shares that he has a poem that he was written.
Hmm.
Then we have like a page and a half, maybe 2 pages, where it's all about this guy's writing, all about this poem,
Yeah.
and it's things like this. He'll share a little bit of the poem. Should I do it? I mean, it's four lines. As one
Yeah.
stanza is, I have seen, as did the Greek, man, cities, and his fame, the works, the days of various light, the hunger. I prettify no fact, I falsify no name, for the voyage I narrate is auteur de ma chambre. And then, like, the very next line is a stanza that's interesting from every point of view, he said. First line
Uh-huh.
wins the kudos of the learned, the academician, the Hellenist, though perhaps not of those would-be scholars that make up such a substantial portion of the popular opinion. The second moves from Homer to Hesiod, implicit homage, as the very threshold of the dazzling new edifice to the father of didactic poetry, not without revitalizing a technique whose lineage may be traced back to scripture. That is, enumeration. I mean, and he just keeps going off. I mean, it's the rest of this whole paragraph is this guy singing the praises of his own stanza.
Analyzing his own poem, saying why it's
It's
amazing.
Yeah, it's so overblown. It's so pompous and arrogant.
Hmm.
And Borges says that. He says it's sweeping, pompous, arrogant, like literature. And he's kind of taking a jab at his own profession here,
Yeah.
because he's a writer and this kind of thing. But this guy is braggadocious. This guy is overly extravagant to the point of almost absurdity.
Yeah.
Where Borges, you can tell, he's humoring this guy.
Hmm.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So they go on, and he gets a phone call, an unprecedented phone call, like during the day
2 days
from
later
this guy.
or
Two
something.
days later, after that, after a sharing of his
Yeah.
poem.
And it was the
And
first time that he had called Borges.
right, they
Yeah.
had never met other than these kind of like
Yearly reunions. Yeah.
anniversary of the death of, or the birthday of Beatrice.
Hmm.
And he asks him to a cafe that's by his house. That he
Hmm.
says, you gotta check out this cafe. So they do. They go to this cafe, and Borges is unimpressed. It's just as pompous and overblown as he is,
Yeah. The
as the
guy
guy
recites some of his
Carlos.
poem again.
Right. Yeah, he's sharing his poem all through it. And then
Hmm.
he says, just it's ridiculous. His own self analyzation of his own poem. Borges says that line. I don't know if you have it. I don't think I marked it, where he's talking about it's not. the writing of the poetry that concerned this guy, but finding ways uh
To
to
say
support
word. Oh,
to like support how good it is,
oh, yeah.
saying things
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's what he's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I
not
thought that you were talking
necessarily,
about the synonyms like he's using and how he
yeah.
makes some of the words that Borges hates even worse.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I laughed
that's
at
where he
that.
gets into using words like, okay, verbal ostentation was the perverse principle that had guided his revisions. Where he had formerly written blue, he had now written azure, cerulean, even bluish. The word milky was not sufficiently hideous for him. In his impetuous description of a place where wool was washed, he had replaced it with lactine, lactescent, lactorous, lacteal. He railed bitterly against his critics. Then, in a more benign tone, he compared them to those persons, quote, who possess neither precious metals nor even the steam presses, laminators and sulfuric acids needed for minting treasures, but who can point out to others the precise location of a treasure. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's completely ridiculous. So he's doing this stuff. Borges is just waiting for the time for this to be over with. And the guy asks him, he thinks that the guy's about to ask him to write a preface for this
Mm-hmm.
horror show of a
Because he
poem.
tells them, I'm going to publish it.
Right? But I need a preface written. And Borges is like, oh God, this is why he asked me here,
Yeah.
to write a preface for this monstrosity. But what he wants Borges to do is to ask another writer That's no good. I think we lost connection there for a second.
Was it me
It
or was
is
it you?
it's me. It's
Oh, I
storming
didn't
outside
know.
here.
I was going to speak, but I didn't know if you were the one with the connectivity issue or me. And I didn't want
Yeah,
to just speak alone, speak to nothing.
he asked a writer that Borges knows because Borges is part of like the literary social life,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy is not. But it is a pretty famous writer, like a writer that everybody knows. And he
Yeah,
asked Borges to write or to ask him to write the preface, right?
exactly.
Go ahead.
So, no, I was just agreeing. And then
Yeah.
he decides not to because he's
Right.
embarrassed of the poem.
Oh yeah. Like he decides he's not going to, and he goes home and he's just
Yeah.
doesn't want to answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But he's basically lying to the guy. He says he'll do it and he doesn't do it.
Yeah,
Another unlikable quality of Borges in this story.
exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, you know, whether or not you are, nobody wants to be caught in a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So he's avoiding this guy now. He's
Yeah.
avoiding the phone call, but the guy never calls. It goes past, some time passes, and the horror of the phone ringing wears off.
Yeah.
But after that while, he does get called by this guy,
And this is the
and
interesting part.
yeah, the story completely changes.
Right.
This guy,
Because we're talking about Beatrice and Carlos's poem and all of those worries, and then suddenly this very big
right, and
thing.
then he says, yeah, he says, these guys that have the cafe that's by his house want to tear down his house,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all the feelings of Beatrice and the memories and the past and everything in on this from Carlos and from Borges.
Mm-hmm.
Everything uh, is kind of thrown out there very quickly, but it's being passed over very quickly as well. Carlos
Mm-hmm.
isn't what he's really concerned with is not what's coming up, and you see that. And then he says, It's great. Borges is so subtle. It's beautiful to for the way that he says stuff. He's going off and he's upset, but then he hesitated. And then in that flat, impersonal voice we drop into when we wish to confide something very private,
Mm-hmm.
he said he had to have the house so that he could finish the poem, because in one corner of the cellar there was an aleph. He explained that an aleph is one of those points in space that contain all points. And it's
So
like,
simply put.
what?
Yeah, and at the same time, what? But
Yeah, like,
I
wait,
guess that when you know about the story and you know how big of a deal the Aleph is and what it is, you then start reading this, and the first time the Aleph is named, it's in that matter of fact way. I mean, Carlos is very mad at the people who want to, do that and get rid of the Aleph, but it's just dropped in the middle of the story.
right. And Borges doesn't know at that point like what
Yeah,
the
what it
aleph
is.
is either.
So
And
it's
he
an
asks,
Aleph. Yeah.
the aleph? And the guy and Carlos says, yes. The place where, without admixture or confusion, all the places of the world, seen from every angle, coexist. I revealed my discovery to no one, but I did return. And he's talking about how he sees this aleph.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is
Yeah.
that? Is it a thing? Is it an
Mm-hmm.
object? Is it a noun? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, what is it? And then, but it's something that is all things. Like, what the heck? So
Yeah.
he says, right then, I'll be right over. I want to see this.
Yeah.
And
And
he's
then
happy.
that's surprising that he says that, but then immediately after he says he's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. He
This
says,
guy
well,
is insane.
it's wild that he never knew it before that this guy was crazy.
Yeah.
And it makes him happy. And he
Mm-hmm.
says, then, um, it brings him joy because deep down they always detested each other. Like, what,
Yeah.
really, right now? This guy doesn't seem to detest Borges at all.
Yeah.
He seems to confide in Borges and actually has shared with him something that admittedly he says that he has never shared with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sharing, in the most intimate of sharing moments, Borges is saying that, well, yeah, we've always hated each other.
And
You
he's
know,
crazy.
like
Exactly.
Borges is totally a
Not a
detestable character.
Yeah, a very detestable character for sure. And so he gets this guy's place and then looks at a portrait of Beatrice. And I really like the contrast in that part because he says, Beatrice, it's me, Borges. And that's the first time he says
Right,
his name.
right,
And we know
right,
that the narrator is Borges. And then he says, and then Carlos walked in, and I realized that he could think of nothing but the Aleph. So there's that big contrast between Borges thinking of one particular person, Beatrice, and that obsession, and then Carlos's obsession, the Aleph, even though we don't fully know what it is.
right.
And just to talk about this term, because we already talked about the story of Sahir, um,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. And I see this
we
as
did.
Borges is Sahir being Beatrice and Carlos is Sahir being the Aleph. And the Sahir is for the people that haven't read the story. A thing that you become obsessed with and cannot stop thinking about. And in this whole story, we can see how Borges constantly tries to name Beatrice even when he doesn't have to. He says Beatrice's cousin. I'm not sure if that part already happened in the story, but he is
Yeah,
so obsessed with her and with the idea of her. And then
right,
Carlos's entire life revolves around the Aleph.
right. So, and so there's a couple things I wanted to say before we get to this big last part. That is a very tender. Uh, it's crazy how Borges can do something in one line, give you a certain kind of feel. Because when
Mm-hmm.
he's talking to Beatrice and talking to that portrait and saying that's me, Borges, that's a very tender line and a half, and it's just so much power in words Borges has. But the poem that this guy is writing is referred to in some of the critical analysis as to be like what did they call it? The Polyalbion, which is a compendium of all the flora and fauna and everything of Britain, and
Mhm.
then refers to another poet or writer that tried to categorize the entire world.
Mhm.
And those kind of things are brought up so that this poem, I saw the poem that Carlos is writing as a type of literature that is trying to encompass all literature. That's what it kind of feels like he's going for.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of these kind of uh, just allusions to infinity and to
Mhm.
trying to encompass everything in one work, in one
Yeah.
thing, or something like this. So many allusions to that subtly in this story. And
Yeah.
the paradox is off the charts, the kind of thing where they're friends, but then it's dropped on you that they're not friends at all. It's all been a sham. And
Mhm.
so many lines I had brought up it talks about the Carlos's work as an illegible library. Like what does that even mean?
Yeah.
But those kind of things, and Borges is using these kind of small hints all through this story to point you to something that you don't know is coming, which is the Aleph. So, how do they look at the Aleph? How does he see the Aleph? Carlos says it's in his cellar,
Yeah.
and you have to go down to the bottom of the stairs, lay on the ground, count up 19 steps, and stare at the 19th step, and
And
then you'll
that's the
see the
Aleph.
Aleph.
Mhm.
And he gives Borges, it says pseudo cognac, but pseudo cognac is brandy.
Mhm.
Brandy is a cognac that doesn't come from the cognac region of France, so that's why it's a brandy. But it's the
Mhm.
same grape. It's the same it's the same drink. So he gives him a drink of brandy, and then
Yeah.
Borges can't take any more of his his talking. So he's like, okay, let me go see this Aleph,
Mhm.
So he goes down there, he sets him a bed, and the guy actually says something that is kind of like, well, maybe he doesn't really care for Borges too much, I thought, with this, but whatever, but maybe not. Carlos says to Borges, the couch is a humble one. He puts like a little bedroll for him to lay on the ground. The couch
Mhm.
is a humble one, but if you raise it 1 inch higher, you'll not see a thing, and you'll be cast down and dejected. Stretch that clumsy body of yours out on the floor and count up 19 steps. Then Borges says, I followed his ridiculous instructions, and he finally left.
Yeah.
He carefully let down the trap door in spite of a chink of light that I began to make out later. The darkness seemed total. Suddenly, I realized the danger I was in.
This
I
is
had
a
allowed
funny book.
myself to be locked underground by a madman after drinking down a snifter of poison. Carlos's boasting clearly masked a deep-seated fear that I wouldn't be able to see his quote-unquote miracle. In order to protect his delirium, in order to hide his madness from himself, he had to kill me. I felt a vague discomfort, and which I tried to attribute to my rigidity, not the operation of a narcotic. I closed my eyes, then opened them, and then I saw the Aleph.
That is such a
So
masterful paragraph.
it's
Just
awesome.
how he goes from, okay, I'm here in the cellar to full on
Yeah.
paranoia.
Yeah. This guy's ridiculous. Please get me out of here. And then he's
Mhm.
like, holy crap, I'm a dead man. And then it's like, wait, what is that thing?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
And Borges is just a master.
Yeah.
And so
And can I just say that this is very
go ahead.
similar to how Carlos discovered the Aleph. He said he was a little kid and he went down the stairs, he fell, looked up, and then he saw the Aleph. So you can really see the contrast between the just everyday, your everyday life, the everyday, and then suddenly the everything, which we're going to see now is the
Right.
Aleph.
So The Aleph is a completely indescribable thing. It's so hard, Yasmin and I, thinking and talking about how to do this part other than just read it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you have to read this for yourself, because what Borges offers us is uh, a vision of eternity, or the all. And I liken it to, the only thing that I can say with certainty that is like this exactly, is the part in the Bhagavad Gita where Arjun is shown the universal form of God, of the Godhead.
Hmm.
And it is completely mind blowing and just an
Yeah.
awesome vision of, yeah, eternity unfolding. And he is terrified. He's completely terrified and overwhelmed by it. And it's
Yeah.
done very effectively, and it's great. And Borges does this thing very effectively in a way that is like a modern, and with things that we know and we've seen, and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
He says, I've come now to the ineffable center of my tale. It is here that a writer's hopelessness begins. He says that he really can't convey what it
He can't.
is
Yeah, that
that he
word,
experiences.
that language isn't vast enough to explain what he saw, but he's still going to try, and that says a lot about
Right.
people, that they'll still
Right.
try to share what they see, even if it's
We
indescribable.
always try. That's for sure. The central problem, the enumeration or even partial enumeration of infinity, is irresolvable. In that unbounded moment, I saw millions of delightful and horrible acts. None amazed me so much as the fact that they all occupied the same point, without superposition, without transparency. What my eyes saw was simultaneous. What I shall write is successive, because language is successive. Something of it, though, I will capture. You want to do it? You got the Spanish. You got the Spanish
I
edition
have a
done.
Spanish edition. I was
Okay.
thinking about it. I would love to.
Oh my God. So, I mean, the enumeration of things that is seen, I'm gonna just jump around. I'm not gonna do it all, but the Aleph was probably 2 or 3 centimeters in diameter, but universal space was contained inside of it, with no dimuni- diminution in size. Each thing, the glass surface of a mirror, let us say, was infinite things, because I could see clearly from every point in the cosmos. See it clearly from every point in the cosmos. I saw the populous sea, saw dawn and dusk, saw the multitudes of the Americas, saw a silvery spider web at the center of a black pyramid, saw a broken labyrinth. It was London. Saw endless eyes all very close, studying themselves in me as though in a mirror. I saw all mirrors on the planet, and none of them reflecting me. I saw a rear courtyard on the Calais Solar, the same tiles I had seen 20 years before in the entryway of a house in Fray Bentos. Saw clusters of grapes, snow, tobacco, veins of metal, water vapor. Saw convex equatorial deserts and their every grain of sand. Saw a woman in Iverness, whom I shall never forget. I saw her violent hair, her haughty body, saw a cancer in her breast, saw a circle of dry soil within a sidewalk where there had once been a tree. And it goes on, and it's just so beautiful how varied these kind of things are. He saw the
Mm-hmm.
coils and springs of love and the alterations of death. He saw the Aleph
Mm-hmm.
from everywhere, all at once. He saw the earth in the Aleph. He saw the Aleph once more in the earth, and then the earth in the Aleph. I saw my face and my viscera. I saw your face, and I felt dizzy, and I wept, because my eyes had seen the secret, hypothetical object whose name has been usurped by men, but which no man has ever truly looked upon, the inconceivable universe.
That's
So
an
he sees
insane
the all.
page.
He sees
Mm-hmm.
everything. And it is so affecting. By one page, you feel like you've seen it all.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And this is not a fraction of what he probably saw.
It's so
Um,
awesome
it
how
is.
in this story it comes out of nowhere. Like it comes out of nowhere for Borges. He totally doesn't expect to see this,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
he sees it, and we are not ready. You're not ready on a first read for what this is
You're
anyways.
not ready on
It's
a first
just
read, especially since you spend like 7 pages talking about his him, not even his relationship with Beatrice, just him thinking about her and going to her father's place to
right,
have dinner, and then Carlos, and then suddenly in one page we get everything.
right,
Um, but some of my favorites are I saw every letter of every page of a book, I think, or just every page in the world, and then
yeah,
my room with nobody in it. So all of these things that you don't even think are possible, he saw. And it also makes me question, like, when, or ask myself that thing of like a room with no one in it. And then he saw a mirror and none of them reflected him. So all of these things that you can't see unless you're looking at the Aleph makes me wonder, like, when somebody's looking at the Aleph, um, are they the same person as the next person looking at the Aleph? Because they're all seeing the exact same thing regardless of who they are. And
right,
they're seeing the world, but they're not able to participate at all in the world or change it in any way.
right.
Um, so yeah, it's
It's
great.
amazing.
It is
It's totally
amazing.
amazing. And it goes from being this story where you know uh an a couple of unlikable writers are kind of involved in trying to keep this memory alive of this
Mm-hmm.
woman that died, that obviously was a beauty and also very very well loved,
Mm-hmm.
but um then it becomes something where nothing ever dies. Everything is all present.
Preserved in that world, exactly.
Yeah,
So things change and people move on, but Beatrice will always be
right.
in the
And
Aleph, and
Borges.
everything, and
And
Borges, and
yeah,
everything will always be in the Aleph. So things
right,
don't change in the Aleph.
right.
Um, but I wanted to say two things about Beatrice. So you mentioned how this name is very well known because of Dante's Divine Comedy, and Borges, in a way, is Dante in this story, how Beatrice is just this idealized figure who
Yeah,
leads him to have this divine experience, which
right.
is seeing the Aleph, even though it was Carlos actually who showed him. It was through Beatrice that he got to that.
Sure. Well,
Um,
but Carlos says right before, what does he say? Like, go down, go down. Within a very short while, you'll be able to begin a dialogue with all the images of Beatrice.
yeah,
That's what
exactly.
he says before they go into the
And right before
stuff.
talking to Carlos, he sees the portrait of Beatrice and he says that thing, Beatrice, my dear Beatrice, it's me, Borges. So it's always infinity, but also keeping her in mind because that is his everything. Beatrice is his everything. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, that I'm glad I didn't forget, was the very beginning when the story starts and he says that he starts going to Beatrice's house, or her dad's house, um, on her birthday after she passes. He describes the portraits that he sees there, and he starts naming every portrait. So Beatrice,
Right.
her profile in
Right.
color, and this carnival when she got married after she was divorced, and all of these things. And it seems
Right.
like he's um, also talking about this very particular type of infinity, because
Right.
Beatrice in all of her different sides and different, I guess, parts of her life. And it
Right.
feels like when he walks into the house, the way he talks about it, it almost feels like he's reliving all of that at once, kind of like seeing everything in the Aleph at once, seeing
Right.
all of Beatrice's life at once.
Right. I
So I
like
just thought
that.
it was interesting to think of the different types of infinity that Borges is exploring in this. Um, Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
so with the beginning of this idea of infinite sets,
mhm.
that's what he's doing with this whole story. And so
Mhm.
there's this infinite sets leading up to this experience.
Yeah.
And then we see infinity and a type of infinity. And then there's infinite sets leading past this experience now, because Borges is such an unlikable character in this story that
Yeah.
he immediately decides to get his revenge on this guy by not telling him that he's seen it,
Yeah. When we were
by
talking
acting
about
to
that, like Carlos showed him this poem, trusted him enough to show him the Aleph, gave him no reason to hate him, and then Borges out of nowhere says, "My revenge." I mean, there is that part where he sees the
revenge for
letters
what?
between
Being an
Carlos.
irritating person?
He does mention the letters between Beatrice and Carlos
Yeah.
um, when he's looking at the Aleph, so he might be talking about revenge for that. For that. Um,
Yeah, it does say something like unspeakable things that he
which isn't
wrote.
clear, but you could infer that they had some sort of romantic
Right.
relationship that Borges is clearly not happy about. And I didn't think of that earlier when we were talking, but
But it's so conniving. Okay. In the most kindly sort of way, manifestly pitying, nervous, evasive, I thanked Carlos for the hospitality of his cellar and urged him to take advantage of the demolition of his house to remove himself from the pernicious influence of the metropolis, which no one, believe me, no one, can be immune to. I refused with gentle firmness to discuss the Aleph. I clasped him both by the shoulders, and I took my leave and told him again that the country, peace and quiet, was the very best medicine one could take. I
mhm.
mean, what a like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And and so Borges in the Aleph is no friend that you want. Um, but afterwards, he said after like 2 or 3 sleepless nights, then forgetfulness started to work in him,
Mhm.
because the Aleph is um just I mean, it was a real experience for him. It
Yeah.
happened. So it took 2 or 3 sleepless nights to get past it. And then he starts going on to these kind of idea that the Aleph wasn't the true Aleph, that there's a bigger
Right.
Aleph than what he saw,
Mhm.
which is crazy to even think about. Like, why? How is there a bigger infinity than infinity?
Exactly.
Right?
Like, how is there a fake infinity?
Right. But that's infinite sets for you, because how many numbers are in between 0 and 1? Well, there's infinite, because you can
Mhm.
always break it down smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
There's an infinity
Mhm.
there. But then how many whole numbers are there? There's an infinity. Which one's bigger? Well, the whole numbers are way bigger. The infinity,
Whole
the
not, yeah,
infinity between
0
0 and
to
1 is
infinity, exactly, or
is
even
a kind
numbers.
of small.
Yeah.
It's weird, and how do you? But that I think that's what Borges is playing with here.
Yeah. No,
That
absolutely.
there's this kind of limited infinity that is the
Mhm.
Aleph that was under the stairs there, but then there
Mhm.
are um more full
Complete,
infinities,
yeah,
yeah, more complete
whatever
infinities,
that
or more
means,
robust. Yeah.
that are
So
all encompassing. So the one that's you lean into something and you can hear infinity, which is something really interesting to try and understand. Because how do you hear infinity? Um, something
that
that I
there was
wanted to,
the infinity in the column of a
yeah,
mosque.
exactly. Something that
That
I
one
wanted
here.
to say before that is when he starts to forget, he sees forgetting as this sort of freedom, because
Yeah.
before he's scared that he's never going to experience anything new
Right.
because he's seen it all, and all of the faces whenever he's walking down the street look familiar, and
Right.
he knows
It's
everything
beautiful.
that's going to happen essentially. Yeah. it is. But he sees forgetting as this kind of freedom. And there's another story that we want to talk about. We haven't talked about it yet. The writing of God, in which, and I always think back to that story. I really like it.
It's great.
In which the character learns about something. He has this again transcendental divine experience, and afterwards he's changed in a way that um, leaves them not really wanting to share that experience with anybody. So he's fully changed. And it seems that like the only two options after experiencing something like the Aleph are to be fully changed by it or to forget and then be human again, essentially. Because when you experience something divine, it seems, and we see this too with the Divine Comedy and the writing of God, there's something divine in you afterwards. It changes you in that way, and you carry that. But then by forgetting, you can fully return to being, in this case, Borges.
Right.
Or at least that's how I see it.
I think you're right on with that for sure. It's a beautiful, amazing thing. There are multiple illustrations of different types of Alephs in this story. The infinity of a magic mirror that would
Mm-hmm.
show everything in the world that um was in 1001 Nights. There's another mirror type of Aleph that was no, owned by Alexander the Great, a Persian kind of story, maybe. I'm not sure, but he alludes to all these kind of things, and it's just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I got much else.
Okay, I have something.
Okay.
So something else I wanted to talk about was Beatrice again. I really think
Yeah.
the relationship between Borges and Beatrice and the relationship of Borges and the Aleph is really interesting. Kind of how, well, we said that we start with this very particular scenario, him, Beatrice, Carlos, the poem, and then get to the Aleph, which is the everything. And then we get to Borges forgetting what he saw, and that eventually the last word of the story is Beatrice again. So it's kind of like this cycle where he starts with Beatrice, sees everything, starts to
Right.
forget, goes back to Beatrice. And I guess I also see it as the different kinds of infinity, but also different kinds of obsessions. He was obsessed with the idea of Beatrice. And even though he's seen it all, he's seen everything, he returns to that obsession. That obsession means everything.
Right.
So it's just as valid as the other type of infinity, which we kind of already touched on.
Yeah, and
But
that
just wanted
that
to
he
say it
does it
again.
by choice. I mean, this is the, we take our pleasure from the things that uh you know could be called good, bad, obsessive,
Mm-hmm.
skillful, unskillful. It doesn't matter. There's these
Mm-hmm.
kind of value placements. Um, you yourself place value on what it is that kind of drives you, and things that you want and love,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. And he's by choice choosing to
Yeah.
kind of stay with
Yeah.
Beatrice, who's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
Yeah.
he's gaining his
choosing
enjoyment
to
from.
choosing to stay with her in the sense that he chooses to think about her every day, kind of like what he says at the beginning of the story: the universe will change but I will not.
Right.
The world will move on but I will not move on. And that ties in really nicely with the Hamlet quote at the beginning:
Yeah.
how I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space.
Right.
um,
Awesome.
but yeah, I think that's everything. It's
Very
definitely not
awesome.
everything, but everything that I have to say.
Right. We could do a lot more on this, but we're about at 45. So I think we're good.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
what's the next one? Do you know?
Um, I
We
think
can
that
go
the
ahead and
next
drop.
one might be the writing of God
We're gonna do the writing of the God.
or Man on the Threshold. I know you want to do Man on the Threshold.
I do, but we'll do it. That's for sure.
Yes, we'll do it. We can do that
We'll
one
do
or
it.
writing of God.
The next one is the writing of God.
I don't remember honestly, but it can be.
I did have it written down, but I think it's going back and finding it,
Yeah. I
sifting
think that
through all of our.
the writing of God might be a good one
It
to
is a good
follow
one.
up the Aleph.
Ease us out of the Aleph with something a little more close to this kind of enlightenment experience and
Mm-hmm.
things that are and what and how it changes somebody, like what you alluded to. It's a very cool story. That's the one with the jaguar.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll do that one, and then we'll be full, back into some more kind of, I'll say a little more accessible, maybe. Borges with the man on the threshold, even
Mm-hmm.
though there is definite layers to that story. And then we will blow it out with the Immortals,
The Immortal. Yeah,
and possibly have a guest for that one. We'll see.
maybe.
That'll be very
We'll
cool.
see.
Thank you very
Yes.
much, Yasmin.
Thank you, Noah.
Happy
This
Sunday.
was great. Yeah.
Thank you, BookTube. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye bye.